Jeremy Jones and JP Walker, I started snowboarding with them, but they progressed so fast that I was just trying to keep up with them.
Well, I'm Dave Farmer, and I started working up here in the 1984-85 season, or 83-84, one of the two. I have to go back and look at all my old season passes. And watched a kid named Brandon Ruff grow up with his wife Melissa. They were up here, they were probably a junior high or high school back then, and they'd come over and cry to me that they were cold and they wanted to go sit in a lift shack and warm up for a little bit. I loading chairs, I didn't care. I let them go sit down. I turned around in their sucking face.
We'd go night riding, and Farmer would let me and my wife now, when we were like 12, 13 years old, he'd let us hang out in the majestic little lift shack, when we'd get cold night riding, and we'd go in there and go make out while he was running the lift.
When I first started snowboarding, the brands here that were big, or, felt relatively big, were of course Sims, and then Gnu had a lot of riders here. You with like Jeff, and my neighbor was Gene Higgins. The shop influence at Salty Peaks with Gnu. Basically, you saw those everywhere when they first came out. As that changed and took a little downturn, it all switched to Nitro. Everyone here, like in Utah, that was a Gnu rider became a Nitro rider, like Andy Wright. So locally, that's who I saw. He used to ride for Gnu, and then he was, all of a sudden, you couldn't get Gnu snowboards anymore, but you could get this new brand, which was Nitro.
I remember back then really looking up to Terje Haakonsen and Jamie Landon. I remember they actually did a trip and a story out to Brighton and to Utah, and that was a huge pull for me, hoping to, if they were ever around, catching a glimpse of them. But so the other guys back then that were really influential and were really local was Brandon Ruff. He was a huge influence to me and was super good. And then just Jeremy Jones and JP Walker, I started snowboarding with them, but they progressed so fast that I was just trying to keep up with them, and they were blowing my mind just from the beginning. And so it was fun to go ride with them.
I would save like all my lunch money. Like I'd starve myself all week, because that mixed with some allowance was like the exact price of a lift ticket basically. And then me and like the other guys from Farmington, like somehow would always get a vehicle. Like one of our parents would let us borrow a vehicle.
Yeah, I was the first one to get a car. I had a Datsun B210, and so at 16 we were driving up there, and that was kind of our whole Farmington crew. So me and GP, Mitch, Brandon, Murphy, most of the time, two other kids, Chris Hayes and Mark Bell. That was another one. He hung around for a while. And so, yeah, we just would scrounge money at the candy machines at school and save up for weekends and quad Wednesdays, because you could get 4 for 1 and night skiing on Wednesdays for like bringing up a can of soup or something like that. And so that was like our cheapest way to get a weekday in. It was like $3. So that was where I fell in love with nightboarding, is just, doing that just because it was affordable. But yeah, the barrier entry would have been the car, and then just getting a season pass. And then 2 years after kind of scrounging money, I think we started buying our passes, and then we've had them ever since.
And that's kind of how we started to kind of discover like all the different crews there and like the different people, because we'd see these guys on the weekend. And back then, that like snowboarding was like, there still wasn't a lot of people doing it. So anyone you saw on a snowboard was automatically like your homie, even though you never met him. So it was like, we didn't know the person's name, but would call him whatever jacket or snowboard he was wearing would be like the guy's name or something, like, oh, that what about Carhartt guy or whatever, you know? So it was awesome. Just those days, for me, it felt like a really like close community, like with even people, like I said, that I didn't know. I felt really like connected and tight with them because we were all kind of discovering snowboarding and Brighton at the same time, and like what was possible on these boards in this type of terrain. It was really cool.
The sickest thing about Brighton and like going there, just becoming a local, I guess, and knowing all those spots. I mean, everyone has their names of things now, and there's so many different groups, but I mean, we named everything on that mountain in our world, you know, like every single thing is named by us, by one of us hitting it or one of us doing a trick or one of us, the experience around that cliff, right? And a lot of people share the names that we've come up with, and we share names that others have come up with as well, and name stuff because we've seen other dudes just fly off it, you know, and that's like, I just think that's pretty special. And then, yeah, I forgot where I was going with that.
The coolest thing about Brighton that I was just thinking about is just the vibe, the energy level of the people there. Like if you stop what you're doing and you like look around at everybody else, like everyone was just, I don't know, it's like the frequency was like the same, you know, everybody's intentions, just happiness, excitement, and the level of writing was just way up all the time there.
With Brighton, the first exposure I had was Transworld Video Mag did basically a spot check on Brighton. And it had like people like Jason Brown and like all the locals hitting cliffs and amazing jumps. And I was living in Colorado, and Whitey, I'd filmed with him for like a year. And he was like, hey man, I'm thinking of moving to Utah. I'd never been to Utah. And it just looked like the next right step. And the other thing that was coinciding with that was I had just gotten on Ride Snowboards, and they rented a house for amateurs. Like it wasn't for the pros. It was, so I moved in with a bunch of the Ride Am team. The one that I moved in with that I think was the most exciting was this kid, Brandon Ruff. You know, within the first week of living there, I was with Brandon, and he was like, hey, just follow me. Like, and if anybody knew that mountain, it was him. And then there are days where he was maybe out of town, and I was riding with someone like Timmy Osler, who was a beast and showed me such amazing stuff. Just, yeah, amazing.
Honestly, like the best thing about Brighton was Vail, because it caught that East Coast influx and held him there for a few years before everybody figured out that Brighton and Utah in general was like the place. So yeah, I recall a day like we were over on Millicent and some of the jumps have been firing. And I think it was actually Blotto was there with a couple dudes, maybe Jay Isaacs. And those dudes were like, holy shit, like this is happening in bounds. This is amazing. And after that, there seemed to be more and more people come. But yeah, I think J2, LeBlanc, Whitey, Ollie Goulet was there pretty early on. All kind of like made that transition from Vail and had the smarts to leave Vail and move to Brighton. And so yeah, it added to the flavor, it added to the mix of people and the tricks being done and the culture that then kind of sprouted from these outsiders, you know, but they were also heroes to us too. I mean, these were guys that we saw in the mags before they showed up to Brighton, and so we knew who they were, and it was cool to meddle with them and ride with them and get to know them as well. Like really cool. It did a lot for Brighton and the riding in general, having those guys.
Early snowboarding, 92, 93, everybody that I knew for the most part, like I feel like the progression, a lot of it was in Colorado, like Breckenridge and so forth. And so I think the first time we went to Utah was probably 93, I want to say. But we were just going on a big road trip in cars, you know, no planes, we didn't have any money. We shot a little stuff there in Vail and so forth, but then we were like, let's go to Utah. You'd never really filmed there of any kind of caliber at all, that's for sure. We go there and we hooked up with Dave Downing, who lived there at the time, and kind of took us to some places, and every place we went, it wasn't a lot, but it was like 2 or 3 days, we just got gold.